So thank you, Robert, for joining us. So you've been Foreign Secretary for about 3 years now. You seem to manage a lot of portfolios or headings at the ministry. I wanted to ask you first, how is your role different than that of the Foreign Minister?
Well, it's more or less supportive role in terms of assisting the minister, the ministry, and even the president on certain issues as it pertains to Guyana's foreign policy, be it in the trade side, be it in the diaspora, be it in bilateral. So my role is to bring my experience, having served 2 terms as minister in different portfolio, to bring that to bear in assisting the minister, his team, the ministry, and even the president himself, because the president is the chief architect of Guyana's foreign policy, and certainly in providing that assistance, that support in ensuring the effectiveness of our foreign policy.
Last year, well, towards the end of last year, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came to front. We were talking earlier about how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs doesn't seem to get much attention, but this border controversy certainly put it in that spotlight. I wanted to ask you about the follow-up to the President's meeting in St. Vincent with Nicolas Maduro, and what's next on the agenda. We know that there's supposed to be a planned meeting next month.
Well, you know, the Argyle Declaration laid out very clearly a commitment by both Venezuela and Guyana, and also under the facilitation or support by both CARICOM, CELAC, the United Nations, and Brazil in facilitating and ensuring that the dialogue continues, with an emphasis on how it is that we can have discussions on mutually agreed issues in terms of enhancing bilateral cooperation and understanding, and also whereby both states are committed to ensuring that there's peace, that the region itself, that we maintain peace and we maintain the type of relationship as neighbors that can only redound to the benefits of our people and to the region at large. You know, you don't get to choose your neighbors, and so that I think it's in our mutual interest that we continue to explore ways of enhancing our relationship, looking in terms of trade, cultural, commercial, whilst we also look at the matters that we may have divergent perspectives on, and to ensure that those matters where we have different perspective or differences on, that the established mechanisms within international law, those are engaged as we have done, and to have those matters resolved in a very peaceful and in a very constructive way.
So with this border controversy hanging over, how do you work with Venezuela? What opportunities are there for cooperation?
The border controversy has been around since 1962, and then we had a Geneva Agreement in 1966. And that has not prevented Guyana and Venezuela from working on the trade side and the cultural side in terms of deepening our relationship. And so that is the perspective that the President has brought in the discussions. Let's look at ways in which we can work together. And we've seen that expression of support for that position, even as we deal with the controversy. And as you know, the International Court of Justice is currently looking at the land controversy as we speak in this regard, and that is where it has to be properly and adequately dealt with. But the other issues of enhancing cooperation, I think we can do that. There's no conflict in that. In fact, I see, you know, that we can continue to promote our interests as country, as members of the region. We share the same continent. We belong to a number of multilateral bodies together, and there are things that we can work together, both as sister countries, but also within a larger framework in contributing to global development, global peace, and at the end of the day, prosperity and improving the well-being of our people. And there are many avenues we can pursue in this regard. So I don't see any conflict or contradiction in that, because dealing with the border controversy is one process. That process is already engaged, and we've constantly encouraged Venezuela to adhere, to support that process, to participate in that process, because that's the only process that is provided for under international law and mandated by the United Nations and the United Nations Secretary General in an agreement that Venezuela had earlier signed on to. So Venezuela had signed on to that process, and our constant reminder is for them to abide and to respect that process. But at the same time, let us look at ways, as we've done in the past, and we continue to look at ways in which we can further cooperation, we can further enhancing good neighborliness between our two states.
So we have our ambassador in place in Caracas. What has the government said to him? What is his priority there?
Well, his priority more or less is to want to represent the interests of Guyana. That's his number one goal, but also to look at ways in which we can deepen our bilateral ties, our bilateral relations. We have a number of Guyanese living in Venezuela. We've had historical ties, people-to-people ties at the border region. We have Venezuelans in Guyana in excess of 24,000 or thereabout who have fled the very sad economic and political situation there, and they've sought refuge in Guyana. We've been very accommodating. But we have that people-to-people ties, but there are many other issues that our new ambassador would have to address and has started to address, talking to the private sector, talking to various other stakeholders, and how it is that we can be innovative. One, in looking at the traditional ways in which we can foster country-to-country tie, but also how we can be innovative in terms of enhancing the type of cooperation, the type of relations that we have between our two countries. And I'm very positive about that because I think the peoples of Venezuela particularly, they're interested in the type of relationship that will benefit them, benefit their well-being, and certainly from Guyana perspective too. Guyanese too would want the type of relationship that would address our interests and that will enhance our conditions and bring about more opportunities for people. And that is certainly a mandate that our ambassador has as he awaits to present his letters of credentials.
One of the issues, well, the land boundary issue is with the ICJ. How do we move forward with the maritime issue?
Well, the maritime issue can only be addressed once the land boundary has been settled, and certainly that has been the position within the context of international law, and it's a position that we've made quite clear that the maritime issue has to flow once the land boundary has been settled.
Well, Guyana has approached Venezuela on this issue of finding a way to settle it.
Well, we have the ICJ process in terms of determining the land boundary,
Right.
and when that is finished, certainly there will be that opportunity to have the maritime issue addressed. So it's all within that framework as established under international law.
Right. So the busy agenda over the past months has been trying to get Guyanese to understand this issue. Would you say that the government, whoever's responsible, has failed in trying to get Guyanese to understand this controversy and to be behind it?
I don't think we failed. I think there's a greater awareness, there's a greater understanding. People are more tuned in. They understand that, having a grasp and appreciation of this controversy or the issues is important. It is about our existential, it's a matter of existential or existence.
But
so,
can we do more?
There's always room to do more, but people of Guyana will have to understand that, our existence as a people is also dependent on our defense of our territorial rights, our sovereignty, and every single Guyanese has that obligation, has the duty to understand the issues and to play a part in maintaining the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our country. And certainly what we have done and what the government has been done, led by the president himself, is to bring that greater awareness and to take the necessary steps, action, policy to support that in bringing people, as it were, up to tune, as to bring them much more aware, a better understanding, and more or less preparing our population, that we all have a role to play, whether it's children, young people, women, all categories, all strata of our society. Everyone has a role to play in the defense of our territorial integrity and sovereignty.
So we're going to see a ramp up of that public education program?
It's ongoing, and certainly there will be other dimensions, there will be other features of it, but certainly it is an issue that will remain on the front burner.
I just want to ask you one more question on this issue. Is Guyana absolutely certain of CARICOM's backing on this issue? Because there has been public chatter about the close relationship individual CARICOM states share with Venezuela. Are we absolutely sure that we have CARICOM's backing on this issue?
We have absolutely no doubt about CARICOM support. We have absolutely no doubt about the international community support, the Commonwealth, and various other multilateral bodies. So, our support is secure. Certainly, we should not be distracted by state having bilateral engagement with other states. But as a community, and all members are unanimously behind Guyana's case, because our case fits into international law. It is the right thing for any country that wants to abide by international law, that respect the UN Charter, or even the principles that we have in terms of the existence of state. Any country that adheres and believes in that would have no other choice than to support Guyana, and the Caribbean community is strong, is unified, and certainly robust in its continued support of Guyana regarding this matter.
All right, so we can talk about CARICOM then, since we're on it. Guyana has assumed the chairmanship. What areas are we looking to that we can lead in CARICOM? Of course, we've been leading on agriculture for a long time, but in this particular period, what opportunities do we see?
Well, the President, upon assuming the chairmanship of CARICOM for this term, has certainly laid out some key priority areas, and the issues, as you've pointed to, food security, climate change, energy security. Also, he has brought to the fore the issue of artificial intelligence, looking at digitization. He's also been looking at some other issues, how it is that we can enhance financing, how it is that we can better trade, how it is that we can deepen, as it were, the functioning and ensuring that CARICOM as a whole means something in a much more deeper, in a much more functional way, in a much more substantial way to the peoples of the region. And the President has identified certain key areas for his chairmanship, which I'm quite sure he will explain and expand and elaborate on once the conference is convened here in Guyana in a few weeks' time.
Do you think CARICOM has a better standing now with the people and government of Guyana? I believe you have been critical of CARICOM before. During Guyana, the 2020 elections period, I think CARICOM came in for Guyana in a big way. Is it now being seen in a new light?
Well, we've always had the issue that CARICOM needed to do more, that CARICOM as a community needed to be much more vibrant, needed to be much more meaningful to the people of the region and to serve the region. And I think it's in the interest that we all have a very objective eye into any regional body. And others, myself and others who have spoken in the past, have done that. Not that we don't believe in CARICOM, but our observations were because we believe in CARICOM and we want it to succeed. And certainly we've seen some improvements along that line. And our president has been very dynamic. He's been supported by other leaders from Barbados, and several other leaders, Antigua and Barbuda. And I don't want to not name others, but I've just given cite two examples, and there's several other heads who have recognized that the time has come for a greater and increased and enhanced and an expanded focus on how it is that we can make CARICOM much more dynamic, much more meaningful. And President Ali, in his meeting in Caracas, in meeting with CARICOM heads, has been very firm and is very committed and very consistent, and he has been able to win the support of other heads that there are things that we can do, even if not everyone has agreed, but what he calls the coalition of the willing, those who are willing to move things forward. And if you've seen some examples that have been taken, whether it's on the issue of food security, whether dealing with the issue of transportation, as two examples, dealing with the issues of climate change, the things that we can do within the community itself to make CARICOM much more dynamic, much more effective, and delivering upon the objectives of the revised Treaty of Chairmanship.
Do you still see some sort of reluctance, resistance on this matter of free movement of people? I think Guyana is probably one of 4 other CARICOM countries that celebrate CARICOM Day. Perhaps one of the few that implements the automatic 6-month entry into a CARICOM state. Can you talk about the state of CARICOM on this issue?
It's an issue that remains on the agenda. Different bodies of CARICOM, including CARICOM heads, and I think different countries have had different perspective on how to pursue that important aspect of making the integration movement as vibrant as it is. I can only speak, and we can only speak about Guyana's commitment, and we've shown our commitment by action, and have always done that, not only by words, but our deeds are there to stand, and we will always encourage others to live up to the commitments made under the revised Treaty of Guyana'S and to take the necessary steps, whether it's the removal of non-tariff barriers, whether it's issues of free movement of skills and people, and the other important elements of making a regional integration movement as vibrant, as effective, and as fulfilling what are the aspirations of our people.
Can I ask you about the interest in the CARICOM private sector in Guyana? We've seen like a lot of international companies coming to Guyana looking at investment and trade. What's been the interest from the Caribbean private sector?
The trade interest has been tremendous. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be having the Energy Expo, and if you go there, you will see the amount of investors, and not only investors, but persons seeking investment opportunities from the Caribbean. And we've had other expos alone, and if you talk to the Guyana Office for Investment, there's always that constant stream of traffic and interest flowing from within the Caribbean region. We're one of the fastest growing economy in the world, and certainly we are the most dynamic economy within the CARICOM region today. And if you look at from all indicators, so it's natural to see this gravitation, to see the shift. And as some may say, our day has arrived, and not only have Guyanese recognized that, but also the people of the region, the private sector region have recognized too, that Guyana Day has arrived, and they too are looking at opportunities. But certainly, those opportunities will have to be pursued within the framework of our national laws, and not in terms of displacing or to the disadvantage of Guyanese of our local private sector at the same time, but all within that framework too of our regional commitments.
Have we seen more interest in people wanting to come to Ghana to work from CARICOM?
Yes, definitely. We've seen that increase interest in persons applying, whether they on the CSME certificate, companies coming in and say they need to procure or to source skills from different territories. Yes, we've seen that interest, but again, that has to be done within the framework of our national law and also our regional commitments.
I've seen you going up and down the circuit trying to engage the diaspora. What sort of interest has there been from them?
The diaspora in Guyana is the Guyanese diaspora, the global Guyanese diaspora, is a very important element in terms of contributing, or a sector or a segment contributing to our development and our engagement. One is to allow them the opportunity to play their part in the development and transformation of our country, whether it's through their skills, whether it's through their investment, whether it's through their network, because at the end of the day, they are Guyanese and they have a role to play, and they also represent a very important asset base that we would need to tap if we're going to move our country. We need so many more skills. We need so many more people to, as it were, to move our economy. Every business, every investment you speak to will talk about the deficit in terms of skills of people, in terms of transforming and moving their projects and moving their activities along. And we see the diaspora as being, as it were, one of the solutions. And that has been one of the ways in which or one of the objectives in engaging it. And the response has been very positive, whether it's be in their investment, person looking in terms of opportunities. If we look at it in terms of remigration, persons coming to resettle in different areas. But it's not only the diaspora too that when we think of North America and Europe, but there's also another important segment of the diaspora that sits right on our border, whether it's be those in Venezuela, a number of them have returned, thousands have returned, in Suriname also, where you had a very large, in excess, close to 50,000 persons there, you have a number of them have returned. even from within the Caribbean. A lot of them have returned from Trinidad, from Barbados, from both the Leeward and Windward Islands. So the global diaspora has certainly been looking at opportunities, but even as I call, the near diaspora too have been very much active in terms of returning, looking at opportunities. And they too, we may not see them in a big, massive way, but they too in their communities, whether they're bringing skills, being in various trade, whether they're working to support other investment and other opportunities, whether they brought back the little capital, the network, they too have been playing an important part in fueling and moving our country forward.
Some of them have complained that sometimes the way things operate in Guyana is not always convenient or best. What are you doing to support that movement of the diaspora back into Guyana? If you
listen to the president and ministers and so, there's also that recognition to that we need to better systems. And every day, when the president speaks at major landmark, he announces one, he identifies the gaps and the weaknesses we have in how it is that we can better manage, better run, better operate to ensure that systems are much more transparent, much more effective, and also provide solutions. So we recognize that there are ways in which, and there's scope for us to enhance and improve those systems. And all I will say is that, one, recognize that it's work in progress as fast as we can, but also for you to also be patient in this regard. But that is not an excuse for us to, as it were, to be, as you say, layman, dilly-dally in those matters. But rather, we take that on board. I'm quite sure various ministries, various sectors are very much aware. Our diaspora unit has a coordinating mechanism whereby when there are irritants or complaints or issues brought up, there's a mechanism in which these are brought to the attention of those entities, whether they're GRA, whether it's issues of immigration, where there are issues of processing at different agencies to get permits and so forth. There's that mechanism in which we alert and look at ways in which we can have those addressed. Take the issue of NIS. The president in an engagement with the Guyanese diaspora overseas in one of those meetings recognized that the issue of NIS has been a matter that concerns the diaspora. What he did, he looked at a creative way of fixing those. He deployed teams from the NIS to the diaspora overseas there, so they didn't have to come here to have their matters addressed, but rather took a very proactive approach, a very innovative approach of going to the diaspora. So that's just one example in which we recognize that things need to be done in a much more efficient and effective way, but also we are looking at creative ways in terms of bridging that gap. But also there's the issue too of reality and expectation by diaspora.
I was going to ask you, do you get the feeling that sometimes they want to be handed things on a platter?
Well, I think it's that expectation gap. And I think a better understanding by the diaspora of the reality on the ground, especially if you come from a first world environment where things operate in a different way, where they've been able to hone and develop systems by over 240 years plus of independence and developing their countries compared with Guyana too. Given the challenges and the setbacks that we've had, the limitation of resources that we have and how young we are as a nation we're trying as much as possible to leapfrog. The president's approach in terms of transformation and his 2030 agenda is how we can leapfrog our country. So we don't have to wait 200 and plus years to get where societies are, but we want to do it in a very short period. But also it is having that understanding and that realization, that there's a reality we have to deal with and there's expectation. And I think over time, we've seen a better understanding and appreciation of that situation.
Can I ask you now about Guyana's diplomatic posts, missions overseas? What is taking so long to appoint ambassadors and high commissioners in various places, Brazil, India? Well, we know the situation with India, but other embassies have been without an ambassador for a while.
Not all. We've many of those posts are being filled. A number of them. Just recently, you recognize the fact that we've been able to deploy, and accredit an ambassador to Caracas. And it's work that is ongoing. We recognize the importance of having all our missions fully staffed in this regard, but some of it also take a process whereby you have to seek agreement, you have to have the best candidates too. And as we come back to the point where we talk about human resources too. It's not a situation whereby we have a line of potential diplomats outside of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs whereby we can easily assign. And then also our work here too is growing. So it's an issue that is actively engaging the President and Minister of Foreign Affairs, and will continue to be given high priority in this regard. But the reality too has to be understood and has to be appreciated as to how these things are done.
One of your new assignments is that of High Representative on UN security matters. Explain how that process is going to work for Guyana.
Well, first of all, I think every single Guyanese should be proud of the fact that we were elected as a member of the United Nations Security Council. The United Nations Security Council is the principal body for the maintenance of international peace and security. It is that primary body. And to be elected, we were elected by 191 members of 192 voting members of that day. We received the highest amount of votes, and it shows a recognition of more or less the entire global community of the role that Guyana can play in promoting international peace and development as a whole for the globe. And I think that's a badge of honor that every single Guyanese should wear very proudly. Why did we pursue a seat on the United Nations Security Council? It's a very important question, and that is, we recognize that we can play a role in addressing the issues, the burning issues that are facing the global community, whether it's the prevention of conflict, whether it's the maintenance of peace, whether dealing with the challenges of food insecurity, dealing with climate change, how it is that we can have much more emphasis on conflict prevention, and where there's conflict, how it is that we can have those resolved. We can address the issues in terms of youth and children in conflict, women in terms of addressing women in conflict, how it is that we can promote greater peace building, greater partnership. And so there's certain issues that we've identified that we recognize that we can make a very important contribution. Also, and very critical, is how it is that we see ourselves as a very consistent and an important representative of Small Island development states in terms of dealing with the threat of climate change. Also, as a responsible member of the global community, advancing the interests of CARICOM. It must be recalled that we were the first country within CARICOM to have been elected as a member of the UN Security Council. And so we see our role, we recognize our role, and we were very happy that the entire UN, those who were voting that day, 191 members of 192, recognized too that Guyana can contribute, and contribute in a very meaningful way in offering leadership at the United Nations in addressing those critical issues.
So what exactly would our work entail?
Well, one is, so there are 15 members of the United Nations Security Council, the five permanent members, and then you have the 10 elected members. So we're part of the 10 elected members, and whereby we're able to advocate and present the issues of global concerns, represent those. So there are some statutory fixed issues, but also we're able to bring to the council representing what other states may want to have an interest on a particular issue that falls within the areas of concern, whether it's in terms of preventing conflict, in terms of maintenance of peace, as I said, addressing the issues of climate change, food security. So we are able as a member to advocate, to bring those issues to the fore, to contribute, because to contribute in a very meaningful way in terms of dealing with that. You know, the function of the United Nations Security Council, it has two primary objectives, and sometimes these tend to conflict. That is, to be effective and a very early and, as it were, body to deal with issues of maintenance of peace and international law. But at the same time too, it also has to ensure that a wider membership supports those initiatives that it may want to pursue. And that is where the two objectives sometimes maybe seem as contradictory, because it takes a while. And we can look at the current conflict, take for instance, in Gaza, whereby the Security Council itself recognized that there are certain things that need to be done, but is not able to get the type of support because, again, it requires that broader buy-in, support, and engagement. So you talk about a role. We see a role in terms of how it is we can contribute in terms of promoting that, the mandate of the United Nations, that is the upholding of the UN Charter itself, and also greater respect for international law, the maintenance of international law and peace. And we see our role is very crucial. In the 1st of February, we'll assume the presidency of the United Nations Security Council, which is an onerous undertaking because 1 month after being taken up your seat, have to go and to assume the presidency at a very crucial month where there are very important issues. But, we're very prepared, our team, our permanent representative in New York. We have a team in New York, and we also have a team in Georgetown too that is working very closely. And also we've been having a lot of technical consultation and support too by a number of states, be it United States, UK, China, Japan, just to name a few, who have reached out and have provided that support in terms of building our capacity in fulfilling our responsibility, which we take very serious. And I want to assure all those who voted for us will be proud of the work that Guyana will be doing over the next 2 years.
How much of a difference can Guyana really make? Picking up from what you said, Ukraine is still going on, Gaza is still going on, and conflicts around the world.
Diplomacy is a very tedious process. And certainly we believe our voice, we know our voice is important, and now we're one of the E10 members of the UN Security Council. We believe that we can be able, as we've done, for the first month alone, we've participated in excess of 20 meetings, looking at critical issues, global issues. We've participated close to 9 closed-door consultations and discussions, and some of those same issues you've raised. And our voice and our position is well known and certainly taken on board. So we're very confident, and you'll see in our presidency in February the role that we play in terms of how it is that Guyana can make an impact in terms of promoting global peace and respect for international law. So I'm modest, but at the same time, I'm also proud of the fact that, and the leadership that our president has had in terms of his focus on those critical international issues, has certainly aroused the interests of the global community.
Mr. Foreign Secretary, thank you very much.
My pleasure.